All right, strap in, everyone. Today we're going deep on a topic that's really electrifying the future of energy. Vehicle-to-grid technology. V2G for short.
Yeah.
You sent us a ton of research papers and even some Wikipedia articles, so it seems like you really want to get to the bottom of this. Is V2G the future or just a really cool idea?
What I find so fascinating about V2G is it really changes how we think about energy. Instead of just, using electricity, imagine being a part of the energy system, using your EV to balance the grid, maybe even make a little cash on the side.
Okay, you've definitely got my attention.
Yeah.
So are you saying that instead of my electric car just being, a car, it could be like a power source for my house? And the grid. That sounds revolutionary.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there are some challenges too.
Exactly. That's what this deep dive is all about. We're going to break down the potential of V2G, but also the real-world challenges, everything from how it works to, the cost.
So let's start with the basics. What is V2G and how does it work?
Basically, V2G makes the electricity flow between your EV and the power grid go both ways. With normal charging, your car is just taking in electricity, like a sponge. But with V2G, it can also send power back to the grid when it's needed.
So my car becomes this big battery on wheels that can actually give power back to the grid. That's a pretty cool concept. How is that different from regenerative braking? Some electric cars already do that, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. Regenerative braking captures energy when you brake and uses it to charge the battery, but it's still just one way. From the brakes to the battery, V2G goes further, letting energy flow both ways to and from the car battery. So it's like really part of the grid.
Okay, I get it. It's all about two-way energy flow. Now, in the research you sent, I saw a bunch of different V2 terms. V1G, V2H, V2X, it's a lot. What do they all mean?
Yeah, there are a lot of V2 terms out there. V1G is that basic one-way charging we talked about. Uni-V2G lets you control the charging, but it's still mostly one-way. Then there's bi-V2G, that's the real two-way flow, where your car charges and discharges to the grid. V2H is vehicle to home, using your car to power your house. V2L is vehicle to load, powering devices right from your car. V2B, vehicle to building. And V2X is the most general term, vehicle to anything.
Wow, so many options. Sounds like a whole V2 world is coming. Can any electric vehicle be used for V2G or does it need special stuff?
Not all EVs are made for V2G. Right now, it works best with battery electric vehicles, BEVs, and plug-in hybrids, PHEVs. Those have the bigger batteries for storing and sending out energy. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, those that make electricity from hydrogen, could also work, but they're not as common yet.
One thing that really struck me from the research was that the average car spends 95% of its time parked. That's a lot of energy just sitting in EV batteries, doing nothing.
Yeah, that's a key point. Millions of EVs just sitting around most of the day. It's a huge amount of energy we could be using. V2G might be the way to unlock that potential, especially as more and more people switch to EVs.
Okay, I'm starting to get the big picture. But let's talk about what it means for the average person. Why should they care about V2G? What's in it for them?
Well, let's start with something everyone cares about: money. Imagine charging your EV overnight when electricity is cheap, then selling some of that power back to the grid during peak hours when it's expensive.
So like buy low, sell high. I like it, especially with energy prices these days. Any other benefits?
Well, think about power outages. They're happening more and more with extreme weather and, old power grids. V2G could turn your car into a backup battery for your home, keeping your lights on during those outages.
That's awesome, like peace of mind built into your car.
And it's not just about individual benefits. V2G could make the entire power grid more stable and reliable. By smoothing out the ups and downs of electricity demand, it could prevent those huge blackouts that affect whole regions.
So it's about me saving money, keeping my lights on, and making the whole system stronger. What about the environment? Does V2G play a role in renewable energy?
Big time. V2G could be huge for sustainability. Imagine using your car to store extra solar or wind power when the sun's shining or the wind's blowing, even if no one's using it at that moment. That way we can use more clean energy and rely less on fossil fuels.
So our cars could be a part of a cleaner energy future. That's pretty incredible. And it's not just a future thing either. I read that Japan is already using V2G to power homes during natural disasters.
Yep, those pilot programs in Japan are showing how V2G can make communities more resilient. And it's not just Japan. Denmark, the UK, Germany, Australia, they're all looking into V2G.
Okay, so far V2G sounds pretty amazing. Saving money, reliable energy, fighting climate change. But what about the downsides? What are the challenges V2G needs to overcome?
That's a great question, and that's what we're going to dig into next. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of V2G and see what hurdles it faces.
Perfect. Let's talk tech. What kind of infrastructure and technology do we need? Is it as simple as just plugging my car into a special outlet?
It's definitely more complex than your average EV charging setup. A V2G system has a few key parts. You need chargers that can send power both ways, communication systems so the car, the charger, and the grid can talk to each other, smart meters to track the energy, and aggregators that manage all the EVs participating in the energy market.
Sounds like we're building an internet, but for energy. That level of coordination seems really challenging. And what about cybersecurity? One article talked about hackers attacking the grid through EVs. That's a little scary.
Yeah, you're right. Cybersecurity is super important when everything's connected like that. Hackers are a real concern. The good news is researchers are working on ways to make V2G systems really secure.
It's good to hear. But what about the EV battery? Won't all this charging and discharging wear it down faster? Aren't those batteries really expensive?
That's a big concern for sure. It's true that lots of deep discharges can be tough on a battery and might shorten its life. But research shows that slower discharges and keeping the battery within a certain charge range could actually make it last longer.
So it's not as simple as V2G always being bad for your battery. There are ways to manage it.
Exactly. And battery technology is always improving. Newer batteries are tougher. Plus, with smart charging and those aggregators we talked about, we can minimize the impact on battery life.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But let's talk about cost. I'm guessing all this fancy V2G stuff doesn't come cheap.
You're right. V2G chargers and the infrastructure are more expensive than regular chargers right now. But as with any new technology, the price should go down as more people use it.
It's like a catch-22 though, right?
Yeah.
We need more people to use it for the price to come down, but the high price keeps people from using it.
Exactly. Governments and companies are trying to break that cycle with incentives and pilot programs. They want to show people the value of V2G, encourage them to try it.
So besides those pilot projects, are there any examples of V2G being used on a larger scale? Or is it mostly still in the testing phase?
We talked about Japan using it for backup power. Denmark has the Edison project, using V2G with wind energy. The UK has several trials going on, and even California has tested it out, but with mixed results. One project there found that V2G wasn't really cost-effective yet, so there are still questions about how affordable it can be in the real world.
That's a good point. Just because something is cool and has potential doesn't mean it'll automatically work out. The cost has to make sense too.
Absolutely. V2G is still pretty new. There are definitely hurdles to overcome before it's everywhere.
This has been a fascinating dive into V2G so far. Benefits, challenges, technical stuff. It feels like we're just scratching the surface.
There's so much more to talk about, like how it could change the car industry, the impact on electricity markets, and what role governments play in all this. We'll get into all of that when we continue our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into vehicle-to-grid tech. Before the break, we were talking about the potential of V2G, but also some of the challenges. Now I'm curious, how could this impact the car industry?
That's a great question. You see, V2G isn't just about energy. It could totally change how we think about cars and, what they do for us.
So instead of just getting us around, cars could become like a part of the energy system. That's a pretty big shift.
Exactly. And one of the biggest things is it could actually make more people buy electric vehicles. If they see their EVs not just as transportation, but as something that can save them money, even make them money, that could be a huge reason to switch to electric.
It's like your car becomes an investment instead of just a cost.
That's a good point, especially for people who aren't sure about EVs yet.
Right. And as V2G gets better and cheaper, we might even see it as a standard feature in new EVs. Even more reason to go electric.
Makes sense. But how would this change things between, car companies and people who buy cars? Could we see new ways of doing business? That's a really interesting question. We might see car companies start offering V2G services, like energy plans that work with your driving habits. Or imagine car companies and power companies working together, giving EV owners discounts on their electricity bills, maybe even paying them for helping the grid.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Suddenly owning an EV makes a lot more sense, both for your wallet and for the planet.
Exactly. V2G could make the car industry and the energy industry work together in new ways. We could see partnerships and services we haven't even thought of yet.
It's like these two huge industries are combining, and who knows what will come out of it.
You got it. And we're already seeing that happening. Car companies and power companies are working together on V2G solutions.
This is getting me really excited about the future of energy, but let's zoom out for a second and talk about the bigger picture. How could V2G change how we buy and sell energy on a larger scale, like in the electricity markets?
Now things get interesting. V2G could make the energy market more decentralized, more dynamic. We wouldn't have to rely only on those big power plants.
So instead of a few big players, we'd have tons of EVs acting like little power plants, all working together to keep the grid running smoothly. That's pretty wild.
Exactly. Think about it. Millions of EVs providing grid services like frequency regulation and peak shaving.
Hold on, I need a quick explanation. What do frequency regulation and peak shaving actually mean?
Good question. Imagine the power grid as a balancing act. It has to stay at a very specific frequency to work right. Frequency regulation makes sure the electricity supply and demand are always in sync so the grid doesn't go haywire. And peak shaving, that's about reducing those big spikes in demand that happen at certain times, like when everyone gets home from work and blasts the AC.
Okay. So EVs could help keep the grid stable, prevent those blackouts. Makes sense.
Right. And by shifting energy use away from those peak times, we wouldn't need to build as many new power plants, which can be really expensive.
Wow, V2G could really have a big impact. But I'm guessing we'd need to upgrade our energy infrastructure, right?
Absolutely. To make this work, we'd need a much smarter grid, one that can communicate with all those EVs and use them effectively.
Seems like a massive undertaking. But how would all those EVs actually coordinate with the grid? Who would be in charge of all that energy flow?
That's where aggregators come in. They would manage all those EVs participating in the energy market.
So they're like the middleman between EV owners and the grid, making sure everything works smoothly.
Exactly. They use software and algorithms to control charging and discharging, make sure the energy goes where it's needed, track battery health, and make sure individual EV batteries aren't overused or damaged.
Sounds like a tough job. You'd need to know a lot about energy and technology.
For sure. But it's a key part of making V2G work well.
Now, how would EV owners get paid for participating in V2G? Would power companies pay them directly? Would they get credits on their bills? How would it work?
That's a great question, and there are a few different models being tested. Direct payments for grid services, time of use pricing where you get cheaper electricity during off-peak hours, things like that.
It seems like there's a lot of experimenting going on to see what works best, depending on the market and the rules.
Exactly. The financial and regulatory parts of V2G are still being figured out. We need clear rules and incentives so that everyone can participate and it's fair for everyone involved.
Speaking of rules, that brings us to governments. They have a big role to play in shaping the future of V2G, right? What can they do?
Absolutely. Governments can do a lot to help V2G succeed. They can offer financial incentives like tax breaks for buying V2G-enabled cars. They can invest in building the right infrastructure, like those two-way charging stations, and they can support research to make the technology even better.
So it's not just about spending money, it's about creating an environment where V2G can flourish.
Right. The right policies can create a win-win situation. More people adopt V2G, the grid gets stronger, and we move toward a cleaner energy future.
Now, what about regulations? Are there rules in place that could make it hard to roll out V2G, or would we need new ones?
That's a really important point. In a lot of places, the current regulations were made for a one-way energy system. They might not work with the two-way flow of V2G.
So we might need to update the rules to keep up with the technology.
Exactly. We might need to change rules about connecting to the grid, electricity pricing, even safety standards for vehicles, all to make sure V2G can work safely and efficiently.
Sounds like figuring out the regulations will be crucial for V2G to take off.
Absolutely. It's complicated, but if we get the policies and regulations right, V2G has the potential to really change our energy system for the better, a cleaner, more sustainable future.
This deep dive has been so insightful. We've covered so much, the tech behind V2G, how it could impact the car industry, energy markets, government policy. It feels like V2G touches on so many important things.
And we're just getting started. We haven't even talked about how this technology affects people's lives, how they behave, their relationship with energy. Those are the questions we'll explore next.
Welcome back. It's the final part of our V2G deep dive, and I'm really interested in, the human side of all this. We've talked about the technology, the costs, the regulations, but what about the people? How could V2G change their lives, their habits, how they think about energy?
That's a great point. It's something we don't always think about when we talk about new tech, but V2G could really empower people in the energy world in a way we haven't seen before.
Empowering people, huh? How so?
Well, think about it. Right now, you just get energy from the grid, use it. But with V2G, you become a participant. You're helping balance the grid, maybe even making money from it.
Like I become an energy producer, not just a consumer. That's a big change. But wouldn't it also make things more complicated? I mean, would people really want to be checking their car's battery all the time, deciding when to charge and discharge?
That's a valid concern. If it's too complicated, people won't use it. But that's where smart technology comes in. Imagine a system that does all that for you. Optimizes charging and discharging based on your preferences, energy prices, what the grid needs, all automatically.
So I don't need to become an expert to use it. That's good to hear. But what about trust? I mean, do we trust this technology with our energy, our personal data? People might not be comfortable with their car sharing info with companies.
You're right. Trust and privacy are super important, especially when you're sharing data. It has to be transparent, secure. We need systems that protect people's data, give them control, and explain clearly how the data is being used. If people don't trust it, they won't use it.
That makes sense. One thing I thought about is how would V2G affect our driving habits? Like if I need to keep my car charged to power my house during a blackout, would I be less likely to, just take a road trip on a whim? Could it actually make range anxiety worse?
It's an interesting question, and researchers are looking into that. It's possible that V2G could make people think more carefully about how much energy they use and how they plan their trips, since their car is part of their energy picture now. But it could also push us to develop better batteries and faster chargers, which would solve the range anxiety problem in the long run.
It's amazing to think how one technology could change so many things. Not just the grid, but how we live our lives, our habits.
Absolutely. V2G shows how everything's connected. Transportation, energy, technology, even how we behave. And to solve big problems like climate change and making sure we have enough energy, we need to think about all these things together.
So as we wrap up, what do you think about the future of V2G? Is this something only a few people will use, or could it become the norm?
It really depends on us. It depends on better batteries, the right infrastructure, government support, and of course, whether people actually want it. But if we can figure all that out, I think V2G has the potential to totally change how we use energy.
It's pretty exciting to think about.
Yeah.
But like with anything new, we need to be careful, think about the risks, and make good choices.
Exactly. V2G is a powerful tool, but it's not a magic solution. We need to have open and honest conversations about it. The good and the bad, the ethical stuff too. That way we can make sure it benefits everyone.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. We've gone deep into the technology, the costs, the impact on society. It's clear that V2G has huge potential, and it'll be really interesting to see how it develops.
I hope this has made you curious to learn more. V2G is just one of many cool solutions out there for our energy challenges. By staying informed, talking about it, and making good choices, we can all help create a more sustainable and resilient future.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of vehicle-to-grid technology. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning. See you next time.